ahead now with our next discussion, which follows on the topic of COP and climate change and the green energy transition and how we are addressing that. It's about innovating for a low-carbon future, CO2 capture and solar power. We have two esteemed speakers with us, Mr. Stylianos Kyriakou from Hellenic Energy and Mr. Aristotelis Handavas from Principia. Please, if you can both come to the podium. Can start our discussion. We have experienced a lot of ambitious, we have been reading a lot of ambitious climate goals from the European Union, mostly striving to achieve significant decarbonization targets in the coming years. In this context, the roles for both traditional energy sectors, for example, such as refineries, or renewable energy from solar power and wind are very critical for this transition. So we couldn't have best speakers with us from Mr. Stelios Kyriakou, who is the manager of the Elefsina refinery for Hellenic Energy. I will start with you, Mr. Kyriakou. What is Hellenic Energy strategy and vision in this regard from the targets of EU and with the fact that a refinery, by definition, is a carbon-intensive industry?
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure being able to share our thoughts, the Hellenic Energy thoughts, about this very important topic. Yes, indeed. It is a common ground that energy transition is critical towards an environmental sustainable economy. Yet there is an underlying challenge, and the challenge is related to how to balance the necessity and the urgency of this transition with the ability to have access to a secure access to affordable products. In this context, in Hellenic Energy, we have already launched a holistic transition program. It's called Vision 2025. With a mid-term target of reducing the carbon footprint by 50% until 2030. Part of it is going to be realized with renewables, almost 20%, let's say, out of this 50, and part of it is going to be realized, most of it, with investments in the industrial sector. That these investments are going actually to be integrated in the industrial sector. And let me give you some examples. We are actively working in 4 categories. The first is going to be towards energy efficiency. So we are upgrading equipment in order to achieve better efficiency. We are enhancing our heat integration in order to have better performance. We are daily monitoring and optimizing the energy mixture that we are using. In order to arrive to the best economic fuel that also implies fuels with lower carbon intensity. And in this context, we also have a new weapon in our armory, which are the digital tools. So the digitalization of this industry sector is giving us the ability, to do to take very fast decisions and monitor real time and optimize our operation. So this is the first category. The second category are renewable fuels. So we have a program and we are very rapidly studying how to build, to co-process bio-feedstock in order to produce renewable diesel, HVO, and how to produce sustainable aviation fuel utilizing hydrogenation technology, using hydroprocessing technology of bio-feedstock. These are actually high capex operations, high capex investments, yet they are low risk because we apply technologies that are already known to our industry. The only potential risk in these activities is the scarcity of the bio feedstock.
Demand is there, that's for sure.
The demand is there, the demand is there, exactly. It is very well described in the RED 3, so the market is quite mature and actually is waiting for the product to be delivered. And also these investments, they have another side, which is the how to optimize the blending activity, because these new products need to be blended in a very accurate way in order to deliver the best quality product to the consumer. Now, the next category, which I'm going to discuss anyway in more detail, is the carbon capture. This is very critical in our industry, because in our industry we have operations that they have inherent production of CO2. And when I say inherent, for example, is in the Elefsina industrial installation, we produce hydrogen. The hydrogen is a very critical stream for our industry. Actually, if you don't have it, you have to shut down the whole installation. So in order to produce this hydrogen, you have a hydrocarbon. You take the hydrogen out of the hydrocarbon, and you have a leftover of the carbon in the form of CO2. So you understand that you cannot avoid this CO2 unless you actually stop. In these cases, there is the carbon capture technology that fits better in order to reduce this carbon footprint. How it works, this technology is like an add-on. You just combine it with your unit. It absorbs the CO2 and allows you to continue operate without interruption and produce your hydrogen. At the end of the day, you transport this CO2 with an end destination of a sequestration to appropriate geological formations. We have to understand a little the numbers. In the Elefsina industrial installation, this CO2 associated with this carbon capture is almost 40% of the CO2 of the installation. We're talking big numbers. So there is the opportunity, one single investment, to have a big benefit. That's why it's so important for us. Now, the next category, which we are just in the phase of studies, because we want to prepare ourselves for the future, are the green hydrogen and the e-fuels. What are the e-fuels? The e-fuels are actually products produced with a combination of renewable hydrogen, green hydrogen, and another component, either CO2 from a carbon capture to produce methanol and e-jet, or with nitrogen to produce ammonia. We have done all these studies. We know what are the pros and the cons. These are actually investments with high capex, high complexity, and there is still innovation part in those, because the TRL are still medium to low.
And the visibility about the demand, maybe, or the logistics as well, or the transportation.
Okay, there is, exactly, I fully agree with you. There is high stress in terms of infrastructure and in terms of the whole value chain, which we can discuss further. Yes.
No. Thank you very much for these intro remarks. I will now pass to Mr. Handalas, CEO of Principia Energy. What are the challenges that you see, also looking from the solar power industry's point of view, that we understand it's now proven to be the cheapest and easiest way to deploy solutions to meet the decarbonization goals that we have been discussing? At least part of it, because in some cases in the industry, as we saw just right now, it's not that easy to do just by plugging in green electricity in the mix. Massive investments are required to accelerate this progress. Are we on the right path, and what are the challenges that the solar industry is facing today from your point of view, with the hat as well of the chairman of Solar Power Europe from Brussels?
Yes, first of all, thank you again for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Let me also remind you what's Principia, because it's a new brand. Principia is the newly formed joint venture between Enel and Macquarie Group here in Greece, one of the biggest investments in the renewable sector in the country, which is also a kind of a vote of confidence on behalf of foreign funds to the Greek economy. As you mentioned, we are in a kind of a transition phase of the energy transition. So in my point of view, we are like graduating from the elementary school now, going to the middle school. And in my point of view, through these years, we've seen a lot of progress. We've seen the solar industry scaling up, being the dominant player now towards the cleaner generation that we are imagining. We expect to have 750 gigawatts of solar in Europe by the end of 2030. On the other hand, we also find out the challenges of the technology, the stochastic nature, the supply chain. All these things are issues that the European Union is trying to tackle. In my point of view, what is important now is that we need to advance faster in policy decisions. The policymakers, the governments, and centrally the European Union now have the responsibility to help the industry and the renewables go faster, because sometimes, as we all understand, fossil fuels are here, fossil fuels will remain here, will help the transition, but sometimes this is distracting the efforts from going faster. Because what we need to do is we need to understand and realize that the real target is 100% renewables energy mix. So the sooner we go there, the better for the economies, the better for the environment and for ourselves. To do this, as it was discussed also earlier, it's very important to tackle all the challenges in grid. We need to challenge the supply chain challenges. We've seen huge innovation efforts. Enel owns a manufacturing facility in Italy called 3Sun, and 1 week ago we achieved a 29.8% efficiency in solar panels, which is like miraculous comparing to the efficiency levels that we had 10 years ago. Europe needs to help such initiatives. Europe needs to help the manufacturers make a resilient supply chain based in Europe. In my point of view, the last thing that I want to mention is that something that we also notice here in Greece, a big effort towards accelerating storage infrastructure. I think that most of us understand that renewables must be paired with storage from now on. We have reached in most of the countries the number of the standalone renewables that we need. So now we need to make sure that we go faster towards creating the storage infrastructure that we need, and also upgrading the grids where needed. I think these are the main challenges, and on these, the policymakers need to act.
I fully agree with your statements, and as we have seen before from the remarks of Mr. Milonas, the investments needed on this are massive. We're talking about almost more than 90 billion euro for our region, which is extreme. So this is one of the risks, if I may say, that how do we do that without disrupting the status quo, disrupting the day-to-day operations. I will move back to Mr. Kyriakou. What is the philosophy that you believe that of the individual projects that are needed in order to meet the vision of establishing an industrial application paradigm, like giving us a concrete example from the group, from Hellenic Energy Group?
Well, as we said, mainly we are focusing on those 4 categories. The main idea behind it is how to optimize the benefit of all those. And what I mean, there is not one single industrial installation that is identical to the other. So the challenge here is how to well position all those infrastructure and all those investments around our system in order to get the best out of it. For example, we have industrial installation that have surplus of hydrogen, which now they downgrade, they don't need. We have another industrial installation that has surplus of heat energy, which we don't need and we downgrade. So the challenge is how to map and position all those investments to get the best outcome. Yet there are a lot of challenges related with the value chains, and we need to further highlight this, especially in relation to the value chain of the carbon value chain. The big driver in this value chain is coming from the avoided cost of the CO2. So, due to the ambiguity of the future projection of the CO2 price, we cannot build a solid investment plan. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that we need to understand that in our industry, those investments cannot be modularized, meaning you cannot just build something now for 10%, and if it goes well next year to build another for another 10%, etc., etc. You need to pre-invest. You need to build in big scales. So this requires from the industry to pre-invest in large amounts. So in order to be able to do this, we need further support, both in terms of CapEx and in terms of OpEx. Okay, and this will have a more sustainable investment plan.
Looking at the forecast for CO2 prices, I don't think that they look that they would be on a downward sloping, let's say,
yes,
position. But indeed, we do have, let's say, a lot of uncertainties looking ahead, but we have seen them going up a lot. It relates as well with policy decisions in terms of what are the allowances to be given to start with, and then play on the market and see and trade and see where the prices will go. But we do have a view that CO2 prices will remain at relatively high levels of 60, 70, 80 or plus, much more than that. A lot of projections even talk about €200 per ton of CO2 in the coming years. So this is a very important element. In this respect in mind, because CO2 is also something that we should measure along the supply chain, the logistics as well of the supply chain. We have seen in recent years solar market being flooded by equipment from China. May that be the solar panels, but not only that. In batteries as well, even bigger, let's say, dependency on the imports from China. What needs to be done in terms of EU manufacturing now to increase the capacity, avoid the strong dependence on third countries outside the EU, primarily China, as I just mentioned, which could derail the entire energy transition that we're talking about? Because there is a lot of discussion on whether, okay, the cheap equipment should be allowed to come into Europe so that we can invest with lower capex in the energy transition, but at the same time, we don't achieve the CO2 reduction in terms of the whole supply chain. We don't support our EU manufacturing industrial jobs, job creation, and our economies. So there are always pros and cons, but what is the position of Solar Power Europe and your company's view on the coming years?
We need decisions. This is the as you mentioned, there is this dilemma that if we go local, we go expensive for the first years. So the energy transition is going slower. If we want to go fast, we need to go to China because they sell cheap equipment. But in that case, we don't have a secure supply chain. So this is the decision we need to make. In my point of view, Europe has been struggling to make these decisions the last 2-3 years, that the situation has become more critical. We think that maybe with a new synthesis, they will try to make the decisions, but we cannot have everything. It cannot happen without a cost. If we want a strong local industry, and this happens also in wind industry, where Europe is still dominant, but Chinese are starting, let's say, ramping up their production, I think it's very important to understand and realize that this should come at a cost. Europe must subsidize these manufacturing facilities. Europe must subsidize even the OpEx of these manufacturing facilities. Europe must change some of the regulations so that there is a kind of a direct subsidy to industries that are helping the energy transition. There can be mistakes, but sometimes in order to avoid the mistake and maybe avoid having one bankrupt manufacturer or one crap manufacturer, we struggle to create an industry for the rest. So I think we need decisions and of course actions at a cost.
I leave the audience with these takeaways. I would like to thank both of our panel members here for the invaluable and insightful discussion that we had. Now we have lunch, which is a brief lunch, if I may say, at least for our standards, but we do have a tight program ahead of us. So please join me in thanking both our speakers.